the difference between recession, depression, and stagflation. High inflation is becoming a major problem, and the Fed has increased its interest rate to deal with this issue. The stock market has also faced a downturn in the first 2 quarters of this year. People are now getting worried about their financial situation. The US government is trying to get out of this crisis as soon as possible, but we must understand the fact that the government cannot do magic within days. Sometimes it faces a lot of trouble in managing its expenses. This situation is uncertain for all of us because we are hanging between skyrocketing inflation and recession. Hello 101 community, welcome back to our YouTube channel. This video is about the difference between recession, depression, and stagflation. Before we begin, if you are new here, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to never miss any updates. Now let's start. Definition of recession. When the economy of a country is facing an economic downturn and the industrial and trading activities also slow down, the unemployment ratio will increase. A recession is defined as a period of temporary economic downturn that is identified by a fall in the trade cycle. It is usually characterized by higher rates of unemployment and lower levels of economic activity. In simple words, we can say that a country is in a recession when it sees 2 quarters of negative growth. In today's world, economists do not just stick to stiff frameworks like whether the country is in a recession or not. There are also plenty of terms between the high inflation and recession that we cannot neglect. How to overcome recession. As we all know, when there is inflation in the country, the central bank increases the interest rate, and the government also increases the amount of taxes to discourage spending on consumers. This decreases the demand for the products and the prices fall. Now, in the situation of recession, the central bank does the opposite, like lowering the interest rate, and the government also decreases the amount of taxes. These 2 steps encourage consumers to spend more money. Now, a question comes to mind. What actions can the Fed take when the country is facing high inflation and there are also chances of going into recession at the same time? Well, this is really a compromising situation. The main aim of the Federal Reserve is price stability, and it also tries to stabilize economic growth. If it is difficult to maintain both at the same time, the Federal Reserve will choose to stabilize the prices, even if it pushes the economy into recession. You might be thinking that it's a harsh step because people will lose their jobs, but it's the role of the Fed. Stagflation definition. Stagflation is a time when there's minimal economic growth and a high unemployment rate. Entrepreneurs may face an increase in prices because of inflation. One point that can be made is, when there is low growth in the economy and high unemployment, it will also lower inflation because people don't have enough money to spend. This decreases demand, which ultimately lowers inflation. If you liked the video so far, press the like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, if you want to develop yourself financially and want to take your future into your own hands, check the links in the video description. So let's continue. What causes stagflation? Stagflation and inflation usually occur due to terrible economic policies. We must also understand the reason behind skyrocketing inflation. We have seen that the US government is continuously printing notes, which means that there is a greater supply of currency in the market. On the other hand, we also see the shortage of commodities and supply chain issues due to lockdowns and the war between Russia and Ukraine. These situations bring the prices of the products sky high. However, no one can exactly say which of these 2 factors is impacting inflation more in the current time. The Federal Reserve is trying to ensure it isn't blamed for inflation, as the problem is with supply chains. However, the Fed is still introducing new measures to try and control inflation. There is another theory that states that stagflation can also be caused by high oil prices that slow down economic activity. For instance, in the year 1973, the prices of oil increased due to a ban on Western countries. Industrial production went down due to this, and the cost of producing the goods went so high, which led to high unemployment. If we talk about the current times, the imports in the US have increased a lot in order to cover the supply shortages. A few months ago, the supply chain was considered to be a big issue for the high rate of inflation in the country. Now, things have changed after increasing the imports. There are a few items like electronics, food, and many consumer products that the US is importing. And imagine the transportation cost that will also increase greatly due to the high oil price. Therefore, we can say that the price of the oil is attached to the price of products. If the oil price increases, it also impacts the prices of the commodities. The Fed is not directly involved in the trade negotiations or pandemic policies. The Fed has also backed its point by showing the figures that only 3% of the current inflation is caused due to the overflow of cash in the economy. The chief economist at UBS, Paul DeNova, has given some facts that might blow your mind. He said in his recent interview that only 15 to 20% of what we spend on food actually goes to food. Imagine that 80% of the amount is going towards other expenses. For instance, 15% of the overall spending goes towards shipment, and the processing and packaging cost also covers 15%. All food companies take around 20% profit margin, and 30% goes towards the employees that are involved in processing, packaging, shipments, etc. Now during this inflation, or you can say that in the name of inflation, many food companies are getting higher profits by increasing the prices of their products because they have control over it. How to fix the stagflation? The economists of the world give a few pieces of advice to fix stagflation, and one of those is to increase the production capacity up to an extent that leads to high growth without more inflation. The Fed should also revise its monetary policy to cope with the high inflation at the same time. Like, if the Fed increases the interest rate, it can put a curb on businesses and consumer activities. One of the best tools that the government has to fight this type of inflation is by saying loudly and clearly that controlling inflation is their main priority. People start to think that this issue will not remain for the long term. The Fed also has the power to reverse these things if there is a fear of recession. If the Fed does the opposite, people won't trust them anymore. If we talk about Australia at the moment, the chairman of the RBA said that they are not going to raise the interest rate until the next 2 years. Now, the question is why he made this statement. This was just for the sake of making people comfortable in the moment when they fear a recession. Now, after the increase in interest 3 times, people are not going to take this issue seriously. However, these are just the points, and it can be more difficult to implement them in reality. That's why the government should be proactive about preventing stagflation. Depression definition. Depression is also known as a decline in economic activities, and as a result, people lose their jobs. The effects of depression are much more severe than those of a recession. What causes depression? The country normally faces depression due to the reason that consumers lose their confidence, and as a result, the demand for goods or services decreases. This leads to low production and companies run out of their business. As the demand for goods decreases, the companies also cut down their expenses. And one of its major expenses includes the salaries of the employees, which means that more people lose their jobs. There are a few other causes of depression as well, including the crash of the stock market, because the investors lose their confidence in the economy of the country. If we talk about the current time, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has published a report that the unemployment rate has increased up to 3.7% in the US. That's all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon so you'll be notified of every update. Also, don't forget to check the links in the video description. And while you're here, I'm sure you want to continue on the path of financial education. Click to watch the video appearing on your screen right now. I will see you there. Take care and stay tuned.